What's going on, everybody? I'm Jerry, and today we got my Week 13 power rankings. We do it every week, all through 32 teams, just ranking them in order. It's not a playoff picture, and I do adjust the teams heavily week to week. So keep that in mind as you're watching the video. If this is your first time watching the video, don't forget to subscribe and then like, comment, and let's get right into it. Starting off, they've been here a while. Moved out of here once, but the Carolina Panthers at 32, it's just where they belong. They're still losing games. They lose to the Titans, who have struggled a lot this year. We had Jason a couple weeks ago recommend that I add the plus minus, which I think as the season has gone on, that's honestly proved to not be as much of a tell, especially because you can't judge the teams that the other teams have played. I mean, I could put that in there, and I could put every score of every game that every team's played, but it's a little too much. We don't need all that information. This is my rankings. I'll tell you my reasonings. But yeah, so like the Panthers don't have the worst plus minus, and they are not last in the league in everything. But as far as putting it all together, they aren't able to do that. So they get the 32 spot with the worst record in the league, which makes a lot of sense. Next, we have Bill Belichick's New England Patriots. Still, they lose to the Giants, who had been struggling a lot. Only score 7 points. They don't know who their quarterback is. I mean, they're on the verge. Like, with how much of a shit show it is over there, I'm tempted to move them past the Panthers, just because it's a mess, and it happened once with the Cardinals before what's his name, Kyler Murray is his name, came back, where I ended up slotting them into the last spot just because of how much of a mess it was. Obviously, they've moved back up. But yeah, the Patriots definitely deserve to be second to last. Probably going to have the second pick in the draft unless somehow the Panthers squeeze some wins together. But Patriots definitely deserving. First mover we have is the Cardinals move back a spot with we have little Kyler Murray down there. They suck. They stink. They aren't really able to produce much offense. Kyler Murray looks like a little toddler running around on the field. James Conner comes back, shows a little bit of promise last week, but it's not enough. They don't really have any notable pieces on defense that can consistently stop much of anything. So it's been rough for them. They get the 30th spot. I think the slight, like, little bit of confidence that you could get from Kyler Murray is really all that keeps them out of the 31 or even 32 spot. Kyler Murray's definitely the best quarterback of this bottom group. But yeah, Cardinals definitely belong at 30. They move back, and the Giants move up because they get a win over the Patriots. Again, not a great win, not a clean win. Not fancy, but Tommy DeVito's been doing it over there. The Giants are still a mess, and I think if they play probably any other team, like I think even the Panthers could beat the Giants at this point. I think they really could with how much of a mess it is over there. But they did enough to get a win, so they had to move up a spot for me, especially with how the Cardinals got smacked by the Rams, who had been struggling a little bit too this season. I think personally more because of injuries, but to each their own. I moved the Giants up a spot. One of the biggest backwards movers, the New York Jets, moved back 5 spots. I was kind of keeping them higher than I would have liked, mainly because the defense was keeping them in it. And then you have this past week where the Dolphins just trample all over the Jets and kind of make a fool out of them. And Tim Boyle somehow looks worse than Zach Wilson. I didn't know you could look worse than Zach Wilson with how bad he had been playing. But yeah, Jets definitely deserve to move back 5 spots to 28. Bears move up a spot, mainly because I thought the Jets had to move back. Bears barely get a win over the Vikings in an absolute shit bowl. Again, I think if the Jets didn't look as bad as they did, the Bears probably don't move even despite getting a win over the Vikings, who had played pretty well. It's really just been the defense. The Bears defense these past 3 to 4 weeks have really stepped up and played a lot better football. And the offense still can't really put anything together. I think Luke Getsy is probably the main cause of that. But there is an execution problem on offense as well, in my opinion, and not a great week running the ball either for the Bears, who had been strong throughout most of the season. I think not having Foreman, I think he probably is the best running back over there. So Chicago does move up a spot more or less because the Jets had to move back. They move up to 27. Same thing with the Titans. They get a win, but it's over the Panthers. You can't move them up much, but I definitely felt comfortable moving the Jets back past them because the Jets just look like a mess. They're kind of in that like bottom four mess of teams. But so then the Titans move up the spot just really because they didn't do well against the Panthers. But next we have the Commanders here. They had to move back too after getting smacked by the Cowboys. But you also have to think they played the Cowboys. That's a tough game. And I think Sam Howell, with more time, can do better. If we remember, Josh Allen looked absolutely horrible in his first first like 2.5 seasons. So, Sam Howell's only in his second season. Didn't really play too much last year. So it's one of those things where you got to give them a chance. They get rid of their probably two best players on defense. So they're bit of a rebuild situation sort of thing going on, but maybe they have the quarterback position figured out. They still have those talented receivers and Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin, and Jahan Dotson. So Washington only moves back one for me just because I think they're better than all the teams previous that I've mentioned. Although you could argue, the Bears smacked the Commanders, so shouldn't they be higher? You can play that game. I'm just not going to. I think the Commanders have been a little bit more complete of a team up until this point. I'm not going to overreact yet. Green Bay Packers, they move up a spot. They get a big win over the Lions on Thanksgiving. Was tempted to move them up more, but I need to see that consistency, especially out of the guy in the corner there, Jordan Love. It doesn't look like they are going to have like a sustainable season where they can continuously put together these wins, and I'll need to see that more to continue to move them up. So they move up just the one spot to 24. Raiders stay where they at in a loss to the Chiefs, mainly because they kept the game. I mean, they were smacking the Chiefs right from the beginning. Look good. Obviously, they fumble and they fold, and the Chiefs end up murdering them. But I felt like just for the whole situation, Aiden O'Connell's the quarterback. You've got Antonio Pierce as the head coach. I could not move them back yet. They're still 5-7. They've played some tough games. I'm fine with keeping them at 23. Move back to the Packers on accident. Let's move forward. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they move back a spot. Wanted to move them back even more. They lose to the Colts. I think they're very overrated. I remember when I was talking about how overrated they were when they were 3-1, and they had just beat bad teams. And people were, oh, well, the Buccaneers, they might be back. Baker Mayfield. And I don't believe in Baker Mayfield. I don't believe in the Buccaneers. I think it's been tough with Vita Vea being out, and that's been a huge miss there. But regardless, and I also think running the ball, I think they've struggled. Rachaad White had a great week this week, but Rachaad White's mainly been more efficient out of the backfield catching the ball than running the ball. I think having a better run game would help Baker Mayfield and help that offense altogether. We've also had some unusual Mike Evans drops throughout the year that I've seen. I feel like more often than not, it's just he's dropping wide open passes, which he's never done before. But Tampa Bay Buccaneers only move back to one spot, losing to the Colts. Again, you kind of have to judge who's around them. I couldn't move them back past the Raiders. So Tampa Bay Buccaneers end up at the 22 spot. Bengals, this is the other biggest mover backwards. I think I could be wrong here. I might be overreacting. I felt like I had to do this because of Jake Browning. Jake Browning is obviously not Joe Burrow and is going to be a problem moving forward. I don't like to project on what I think is going to happen the rest of the season. That's how you end up with just making a playoff picture video. But I think it's written in the stars at this point that the Bengals are just not going to be a playoff contender like I'm sure they had hoped. And losing Joe Burrow is huge. So I'm moving them back pretty far, assuming that's kind of where they're going to land. they played a close game against the Steelers, and it was a winnable game. Personally, I think it was just because their scheme, they definitely could have won it even without him. So until they prove that they can do that, though, they're moving back. I feel like I might have moved them back too much, but I'm fine with where they're at. I'm leaving them here at 21. Next, we have the Chargers. Los Angeles Chargers, 20th. I thought about putting them behind the Bengals, but the Chargers just can't win games. Especially, it was a close game against the Ravens, so you have to factor that in too. Ravens are one of the best teams in the league, but I still just don't think they're going to cut it. Brandon Staley's, he's probably got to be gone after this year with how much of a mess everything. This is the rare game where the defense actually did play pretty well and the offense wasn't able to produce like they normally did and turn the ball over more than they normally do. Probably credit to the Ravens defense. They're very strong defense this year, but Chargers just can't put it all together in one game, and they stay at 20. It looks like they could keep moving back, though, oddly enough. Saints, I moved them. They moved back this far for me 4 spots, mainly because of this Falcons game. I really was high on the Saints going into the season. I thought that they were a lock to win the division, and now the Falcons have actually just passed them. And we'll skip on to the next one because it is the Atlanta Falcons moving up 4 spots. And the reason we have these 2 big movers is I don't like to move a team past another team just because of them beating another team, as I talked about earlier with the Bears and the Commanders. But with the Falcons, their run game is really kind of unstoppable. I've talked all season about, in my picks videos, I do the rushing record through the season. And I say, if you're betting on a team, pick the team that's going to run the football better. They're probably going to cover. And they've done very well so far, except for the Falcons, Titans, and Bears because of how strong their run game is, but their inability to win games. And they're kind of proving that they still have this strong run game, especially the 3-headed monster of Bijan, Algier, and Flash, Cordell Patterson. And so but I had to move the Falcons past them because they weren't too far away from each other. The Falcons just took over the division, and they beat them head-to-head. So with all that being said, I felt like they were worthy of moving up. Bit of an overreaction. I think the Saints are the better football team, which is crazy to say because they just lost. But teams have fluke games, and the pick 6 was really the big game changer of this one, which it happened, but Falcons move up 4 spots to 18. One of the biggest movers forward this week. Again, feel like it could be an overreaction, but we'll go over it all a little bit later here. Minnesota Vikings, they move back 3 spots to 17. You have to move back if you lose to the Bears, and it looks like the Pasternaut experiment could be over, which is sad. I'm leaving them in the graphic here. But the Vikings played great defense, and he just turned the ball over a bunch. I think a lot of it was unlucky, and it was, the ball bouncing off of another player and then Bears just being in the right position. It happened a couple times. But it's still poor choices. And I think the other reason the Vikings have to move back is Kevin O'Connell showed he's not always going to call a perfect game. I think Kevin O'Connell is probably biggest one to blame for this loss because Brian Flores' defense played great and did exactly what they needed to do, especially causing the turnovers towards the end. But Kevin O'Connell tried to call a game for Josh Dobbs as if he was Kirk Cousins. And Josh Dobbs is not Kirk Cousins. He's mobile. He can get out of the pocket, move around. You can run designed runs. He's a good improviser, and you didn't give him that opportunity. I think the Vikings win this game pretty easily, even if he's just in the game. I don't even know if Justin Jefferson makes the difference, although with how close the game was. The Bears' pass rush was getting there, and he was flustered throwing it into coverage. So I don't know. Vikings had to move back. That's the moral of the story. I might have been too high on him, having him at 14, but they were in the playoff picture. So Minnesota Vikings move back, 3 spots to 17 at 6-6. The Rams had to move up a lot, although a lot. 1 spot, beating the Cardinals. I just felt like they were worthy of moving up, and I feel like this showed that their team, although it was against a bad Cardinals team, I think it shows that their team is um, is kind of complete, and like the emergence of Kyron Williams was huge. Think he's going to be a weapon moving forward. And I think the big thing was winning a game with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua did not have they did not have great days. Cooper Kupp did get injured, so he was out for a portion of the time, but neither receivers did well. Actually, Tyler Higbee was the best receiver, and then the second best receiver was Kyron Williams, who was also the best running back. So I liked seeing a talented week for the Rams without using Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, kind of showing another side, and that's why they move up one spot to 16. Then we have the Colts, biggest mover up. It was beating the Buccaneers, but I think I was in previous weeks. I think I was too low on them. They're actually in the AFC playoff picture right now, which is nuts. They're 6-5, and it's Gardner Minshew. I am high on Gardner Minshew. I think he's one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the league, meaning there's probably a team he should start on. If Anthony Richardson, they decide he's the guy, and the Falcons don't have high enough draft pick, and Gardner Minshew is available, I think Gardner Minshew would fit well into the Falcons' offense. I don't know if he fits in very well in the running aspect. Like, they'll sometimes use Ritter, but as far as getting the ball to the big targets of Drake London and Kyle Pitts and handing the ball off or throwing little dump passes to the three-headed monster in the backfield, feel like Gardner Minshew can do it. I like the Colts, and I like what they've been doing. Again, they're in the playoff picture, so they have to be in the top half for me of the power rankings, and that's what moves them up 5 spots to 15. And the other one of the biggest movers, the Denver Broncos, who have just emerged as this like could very well be a playoff team. They're right behind the Colts. They're actually tied. There's some sort of a tiebreaker that leaves the Colts in the picture. But I talk about it in my takeaways video, but we have Russ, who couldn't do anything last year while the defense was playing great last year. Then start off the year, Russ is playing great, and the defense can't stop anybody. Now the defense is starting to pick it up again, and you're seeing this very complete football team that's going out there and beating other great football teams consistently week in and week out. So they had to move up more. 14, I think you could see them flying up if you continue to see inconsistencies with these other teams ahead. I think the Broncos could fly up even into the top 10 in these next couple weeks if they keep up what they got going. Their +-2 is a little inflated because of that Broncos-Dolphins game where they lose 70-20. You know, that's 50 points right there. So that's another reason. Can't really pay attention to the point differential, but I do like having it on the screen as kind of a point of reference for what's going on. Then we get the Texans. Texans get a loss. I couldn't move them back. Like, I couldn't move the Broncos ahead of them yet, or I couldn't move the Colts ahead of them. You have to look at the teams around. So I left the Texans where they're at. They played a great game where they almost tied and also almost won against the Jaguars, who I've had as a top 10 team most of the year. And it's a big game for them. I think you don't want to talk about moral victories, but for me, it should be a moral victory for the Texans because you weren't expecting to be able to play against strong teams like the Jaguars or any of the other teams that they played and maybe even compete, much less almost win the game. So good on the Texans. Great game by Stroud again. Stroud to Tank Dell combo is nuts. Hurts Nico Collins on my fantasy team, but that's all right. Houston Texans stay where they're at 13. And who moves back, this could be like a future biggest mover backwards, is the Seattle Seahawks with how they've kind of flopped. I want to say they were 6-3 or 6-2, and they just keep losing games. They have not been playing well. They're kind of falling apart. I think it's the whole problem is the trenches. They're having that issue where if you can't be solid in the trenches, you're going to have problems, and that's what's going on for them right now. I think there's other problems too, but Geno Smith's not looking like he was last year. You dealing with Kenneth Walker injuries, that doesn't help obviously, but only moved back one spot this week playing against a tough team in the 49ers, but I think they couldn't fly back if they continue to lose. So they move back just the one spot to 12, whereas the Pittsburgh Steelers move up a spot to 11. Moving up only one because you barely beat Jake Browning and the Bengals. I don't think it's a very impressive win. I think it really just moves them up that one spot. I think it should, and I think the biggest thing for them is putting up 400 offensive yards, actually clicking. Kenny Pickett throwing the ball efficiently. Najee Harris actually looking even flashes of college Najee Harris and even rookie Najee Harris. Seeing that come back is great for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they only move up to one spot. I think they're proving that they can win games, but this is the first game this season that they haven't been outgained, and they're 7-4. So they're going to have to string together some wins against some talent, some convincing wins rather against some good teams for me to move them up a lot more. They move up 1-11. The Browns move back a spot in a loss, and a bad loss to the Broncos, who have been great, but it's mainly the worst part is the injuries. The Browns have, in that just last week's game, you lose Myles Garrett, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, basically forcing P.J. Walker, who never really played great, and a couple games played good enough, but forcing P.J. Walker, who you benched, back onto the field. We knew he wasn't going to do it. And Amari Cooper, Myles Garrett, DTR, it's just not a great situation. I don't know what's going to happen moving forward. I can't move them back a lot, but you can see those defensive rankings. They're up there. They're playing some of the best defense in the league. They just need to put together some offense. Obviously, I think it almost seems like people forgot that they lost Nick Chubb, and Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt isn't quite cutting it. So Browns just move back to one spot. If they can't figure out the quarterback situation, I definitely see them moving back, unfortunately, just with the unfortunate the injuries and everything that's going on with that team. The Bills move up 3 spots. Jerry, why did the Bills move up 3 spots in a loss to the Eagles? Because I think between last week's games and this week's game, I think the Eagles are one of the best teams in the league, and the Bills looked good. Of course, they fumbled, and the defense let Jalen Hurts throw all over him and run and tush-push and whatnot. But I think the Bills are worthy of being back into this 9 spot. They played better than I anticipated against the Eagles, and I think they looked like a pretty complete team. I think we know that Josh Allen is going to make some mistakes, but it doesn't seem to matter. It seems like regardless, they can make it happen. And people forget it doesn't really matter because they're out for the season, but Matt Milano and Trey White are out. You can't factor that in as, they'd be better with them. But I think, to me, they're worthy of the top 10. It's tough to say it's 6-6. They're going to have bye week here. And you look at their rankings, 5th and 4th in offense and 6th and 11th in defense. They're playing good football. They put up the most offensive yards this week. And against the Eagles, who had a good defense last year, not so much this year. But had to move up to 9 for me, competing against the Eagles, which in a crazy world, this could be a Super Bowl. If the Bills get hot towards the playoffs, could have been a Super Bowl matchup there. So I think that's a little bit of a hot take, maybe because the Bills haven't really been able to string together those solid, convincing wins. But I feel comfortable with them at 9. Again, could be a little high, but I'm cool with them there. Detroit Lions in a loss to the Packers. Wanted to move them back more. Couldn't move them past really any of those teams that I just mentioned in the Bills, the Browns, the Steelers. I couldn't move them past that yet. The Lions are still a good team that have put together a couple unfortunate losses. You can see that plus minus only at plus 36 with a 8-3 record. Would like to see that be better. But again, as I mentioned with the point differential, it's a little inflated because they got murdered by the Ravens. I want to say it was 38-3 against the Ravens. So that right there in that loss, you're doubling. You're in the 70s range with not factoring that in. So just move back to 1 spot. It's a loss to the Packers divisional on Thanksgiving. You don't want to do it. And I don't think I can be out on the Lions. If they lose next week too, or they string together 2 more losses or 2 more games of Jared Goff throwing a bunch of turnovers and or just turning the ball over in general, and the defense playing like they have, I think they definitely could move out of the top 10. But as of right now, they're still 8-3. They're still a great football team in the league. so they move back just one spot to 8. Then we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, who barely beat the Texans. Feel like they were worthy of moving up a spot because the Texans are a tough football team this year, and they played a good all-around game aside from the run game, which had been strong earlier in the year with Travis Etienne. You'd like to see that be a little bit better. Maybe the Texans just had their number, but when you beat a good team that's been hot this year, you deserve to move up. This is another one, only plus 29 in the point differential at 8-3. So interesting there. Jacksonville moves up one spot to 7. Makes sense to me. And then I'm going to be honest, if you watched the power rankings last week, a lot of this is going to be similar here because nobody did anything convincing enough to move it around, and a lot of teams played much poorer teams. So I didn't feel comfortable moving a lot around. So the Cowboys get a massive blowout win, but it's against Commanders. So I don't love that. The Miami Dolphins get a massive blowout win against the Jets. Don't love the Jets. I don't think they're very good. So I didn't feel comfortable moving those two around. I didn't think the Cowboys' victory was more convincing than the Dolphins. I think you could make the argument that the Cowboys should be ahead of the Dolphins at this point just because I feel like the Cowboys' offense has played better than we expected and their defense has been one of the best in the league, whereas the Dolphins, we kind of assume that with everybody flying around the field, they're going to be one of the top offenses, and their defense although has played better recently, did not play well at first. So I think recency bias, you could probably move the Cowboys ahead of the Dolphins if you wanted to, but that's not what I'm doing. I'm leaving the Cowboys behind the Dolphins. 49ers was another one I thought maybe you move up because they just beat the Seahawks, who have a winning record and have been a good team up until the last few weeks. And it was a convincing win, but I couldn't feel comfortable doing that because the next team is the Chiefs, which the Chiefs get a two-score win over the Raiders, who the Raiders have just found ways to stay close in games or at least compete. And they do the same thing in this one where they go up 2 scores right away and then just stall out and don't do anything. But again, if you want to go with the recency bias, you could probably put the 49ers ahead of the Chiefs. But with a convincing win over Seattle versus a convincing-ish win over the Raiders, I'm keeping the Chiefs up here, though. I feel like that duo right in the corner there, Mahomes and Kelsey, is a little bit unstoppable still. So I'm leaving I move back the Chiefs one spot because the Ravens move up. Ravens getting a win over the Chargers. Chiefs, they have the win over the Raiders. I just feel like Ravens still look like the more complete team. They did it without Mark Andrews, who is clearly Lamar's top target. Zay Flowers steps up. I think that the Chiefs' defense and the Ravens' defense are pretty comparable. Like if we look at the rankings, we have 2-2 for the Ravens, 3-4 for the Chiefs, and I think because of the lack of offense on the Chiefs, I think it almost makes it a little bit more valuable for the Chiefs that the defense for the Chiefs has done what they've been able to do with the offense, having Mahomes throwing to receivers that have bricks for hands. I'm taking the Ravens over the Chiefs at this point. Just a little bit more complete football. It's not really against Mahomes. It's more against the bad receivers over there. I think I like the play calling by Andy Reid still, and I love how the Chiefs defense has been playing. I like the run game, but then the Ravens and Keaton Mitchell have kind of stepped up. Gus Edwards has been hurt, but looked great when he was healthy. So taking the Ravens up to the number 2 spot, and then we keep the leaders of the pack a while. We'll give a quick shout out here to Jason, who keeps telling me that I need to move the Eagles back and they're overrated, which I do think 10-1 is a little I can't confidently say that I think the Eagles are the best team in the league, but at this point they just keep finding ways to win games. And these last 2 weeks, you're playing against tough opponents, and they still found ways to win. Whether they're losing early or whatever the case is, they're not, firing on all cylinders at the beginning. They find ways to win games, and that's why they're 10-1. And if you were looking at teams that were going to make a Super Bowl run, you have to be able to consistently win games. Now, something could happen where like the 49ers had their downtime in the season where they lose 3 games and they just don't look good. Then they get hot. Maybe they stay on that hot streak, end up being better than the Eagles, and the Eagles have their downturn at some point. Or maybe, unfortunately, somebody has an injury or, they lose A.J. Brown. I feel like that's a big loss in that offense. So I think the Eagles they're going to have to keep this up to stay up here. And even if, they play a game like even this, like you have to remember that they barely beat the Bills, who had kind of been struggling. Still a good football team. But I think the Eagles are on the edge of one, but they definitely still have to be one with the best record by 2 games in the league right now. So they get number 1. Let's do a quick overview of the whole shebang. Can we do overview of the whole shebang? There she is. Whoops. Hello. That's the thumbnail. Howdy do. So again, I like to look at this and go, okay, well, who do you move where? I mentioned the Seahawks probably could be moving back more if they keep up with what they're doing. I think you could even say the same thing about the Browns, especially if Myles Garrett's going to be out for a few weeks. That would hurt. And then, not knowing what's going on at quarterback. I don't know, the Texans, I feel like, if it's kind of a too good to be true sort of thing, they could move, but I like where they're at. I think the Falcons and Saints, I might have overreacted, and I still think that the Saints are the better football team that are just running into a couple of little errors there. Rams, I think I could be overreacting on, and I think I could have them too high. I didn't feel like I could move them back, and with how convincing that win was, despite just being over the Cardinals, couldn't move them back much higher. And I don't see a team in like the 17 and back that I could confidently say is better. Like you could argue the Vikings, but they just lost to the Bears, so using the recency bias. And, now they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing at quarterback still. Whereas, you still have Stafford and all those weapons over there. I guess you're going to get Justin Jefferson back for the Vikings, so that would be something to look forward to and a reason that they could move up. But as of right now, I feel comfortable with where that is. I think the Bears, if they can string together some wins, they could probably move up into the low 20s. I don't think they move any higher than that this whole season. And then what's the other team? I think the Buccaneers. I think the Buccaneers could move back even farther. And the Bengals, I guess, are the biggest question mark because they've stayed close in these games with Jake Browning, but it's still just Jake Browning. So if they can continue to stay close against good teams and beat bad teams, they'll probably move up a little bit more, but they're not going to be in the playoff picture, and it might even be tough to move them into the top half. So let me know what you think I got wrong. I mentioned the Lions. If they continue to lose or play close games against bad teams, they could move back to even the Jaguars, who have not really gotten many convincing wins at all. But yeah, let me know what I got wrong. Let me know what you would change. Just comment down below, and then if you have any advice or any thoughts, anything that you would change, comment that as well. Just like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.